to the Seahawks 360 podcast, a Sports Ethos production, where we look at the Seahawks from every angle every week. I'm your host, Candace Higgins.
And I'm Tino Ganasius.
But we are back to our For Better or For Worse series. Took a little break, had to talk about the schedule first. Very important, time-sensitive thing. But we're going to get back to it. We've got all off-season to talk about it. So I think I don't feel too bad about taking a break, but I'm glad we did. I'm glad we really get to take the time that's deserved to talk about this defense, because this is really, I think, the focal point. Obviously, our new head coach is more of a defensive head coach. And so this is critical, I think. So let's get into it. Let's break it down. For those of you who did not catch the first episode on offense, first of all, go check that out. We're available on Spotify, iTunes, YouTube. Anyway, listen to that. We're going to break down each category, go group by group, sort of give our opinions, break it down, and then at the end, we'll tell you if we think that group is better or worse off. So I think a great place to start would be to start with the defensive line, because that's really been a conversation point for years, really. I mean, it's been, I'd go as far back as to the year before they got Clowney, that the defensive line has been the talk in some regard, either from the edge perspective or from the interior perspective. And so since it's been such an important and really, I think, a sore spot, sore spot for the defense for so long, let's start there. So this year we are looking at Draymond Jones, looking at Leonard Williams, re-sign him, looking at Jarran Reed, drafted Byron Murphy now, still have Mike Morris, still have Mike Adams, Miles Adams, still have, I think, John Hankins. It was an offseason acquisition, if I'm not mistaken. And then Cam Young, who was also drafted last year. So that's a deeper, just on paper, it's a deeper team than it was last year, because last year, this time, and we are judging this based off this time last preseason, this time last year. And at that time, there was not a Leonard Williams. And at that time, there was not a Byron Murphy. Obviously, he just got drafted. So you had Draymond Jones. He was your big acquisition at the time. Or no, I think they had just signed him to an extension this time last year, I believe is that. Yeah. So you've got him, you had DJ Reed, you had Mike Morris, you had Mario Edwards was a guy that they were depending on for big minutes at that time, big snaps. Miles Adams was a part of the rotation, and Cam Young was also, now he was a rookie. And so there were big questions this time last year about this unit on all fronts. At the time, we did not know how, I don't know if I mentioned Jarran Reed was an acquisition, he was a pickup, but a lot of people questioned the size of the defensive line. People questioned, would Jarran Reed, they were talking about making him nose tackle, and that was a conversation. Jarran Reed at the nose was really taking over all of the conversation in terms of all-season talk, and he proved out to be able to do it really well. I was suspect myself, I'll be honest, that especially when I initially heard it, I had a lot of concerns, but he was able to, as I think I began to get more comfortable once I saw the first game, I saw how he was able to hold up, and I thought it might work. And from there, I was sort of a believer in Jarran Reed. But what's your take, Tino, on sort of how the lines progressed, the differences between last year and this year, and where we are right now?
I think it's better all around. So deeper, more talented, certainly more resources invested in this line. Now you've got to pay Jones and Williams, and you invested obviously a high pick in Murphy as well. But I think it was necessary. And for Mike Macdonald to execute his scheme, he needs talent up front, right? He needs to have guys that can penetrate. He likes to have a bigger nose to be able to occupy multiple blockers, which is where I think Hankins comes in. The one question I have so far is I've seen that Draymond Jones has been training and lost weight. And I wonder if ultimately Jones becomes a part of the edge rotation more so than playing the 5-tech. And what that would do, obviously, is open up more opportunity for Byron Murphy to play immediately. But I also think it would put more stress on Mike Morris or whomever, Miles Adams, whomever takes over that third and fourth five tech spot if Jones isn't there, right? It really does change the depth. But and I do think we'll see Reed and Hankins in more of a timeshare and Reed has done a phenomenal job, but Hankins can play that role also really well. The other option is that Reed is able to swing between the two because he has played a lot of five tech type stuff in his past, right? Last year was the first time he really did play on the nose. So the big thing is Mike Macdonald has clay to work with. He's got chess pieces, right? You can't go into a chess match with all pawns. And what he has now are some other pieces to use. And, when we watch the Niners and we watch some of the other dominant teams, the Chiefs even, you see these teams place a premium on defensive line play. And not just edge, but, up the middle as well, getting to the quarterback quickly. And Pete Carroll didn't really do that. They, to a certain extent, they would try here and there, but it'd be like you've got, two dudes who were pretty good, or pretty talented, and then two dudes off the street. And the other teams would just target the dudes off the street. And it wouldn't matter if you had two guys that were good. So now you have this balance where, I think Murphy is going to be able to get upfield and cause a ton of havoc upfield. And I think the attention he attracts is going to change the ability to double team on the other side. So maybe Leonard Williams now faces single team all the time or often. Or if Draymond Jones is playing a five tech, he's able to do the same. So to me, this is the most exciting position on the team, is the defensive line. And I'll include the edges when I say that, because I think the edge room is so deep as well. I think this becomes the strength. And if this team is going to win more than, say, 9 games, it's going to be because this defensive line is playing at a level we haven't seen in a long, long, long time.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. Well, with a lot of what you said, I mean, I agree. Definitely an upgrade. I feel great about where the defensive line is. I will come back to talk a little bit more about the Draymond Jones thing because that is a big deal. But essentially, you're replacing Mike Morris, who was coming into his rookie year, and Mario Edwards with Leonard Williams and Byron Murphy, which is, I mean, you just can't express how much of an upgrade that is. No, that's no knock on the other players. That's just really an upgrade in talent. And then those guys get to truly be your depth. And I think that's important, especially for Mike Morris, because he did not really get to play much of his rookie year. I mean, really at all. I think, when did he go down? Week 2, 3? I mean, it was super early. Mm-hmm. Super early in the year, which was really unfortunate because I do believe he was showing a couple of flashes, but this was just so hard to know because it was such a small sample size. So I do think that it's possible also that we see Murphy at the nose, because he did do that quite a bit in college. They really leaned on him to take on the double team like quite a bit. They used him as a nose, which is interesting because he was next to T'Vondre Sweat, but they preferred Murphy at that role, and he was able to stand up at the point of attack and hold up well for a guy who's undersized, similar to like Jarran Reed did. Right. And I know that you mentioned that Mike Macdonald wants size at that position, but I don't know. I don't know if, I mean, I know he's had size under, when he was with the Ravens, that was personnel that he was given, though. I'm not sure we can definitively say that was, I know he likes versatility. And if you're going to have a guy that's super big in the middle there, it doesn't leave you a lot of versatility. So I'm not sure. I think we're seeing him prioritize the versatility over just having the space eater in the middle. I think, and maybe he's evolving. He's always talking about that growth mindset. Maybe he's learning that you don't have to have size, necessarily a huge size, to be aggressive at the point of attack. In fact, if you go back and you look at this is something I mentioned the last offseason when we were talking about Jarran Reed being the nose tackle. I went back and I looked at the 49ers defensive tackles, and they don't have a bunch of size on that line. They just have guys who are physical, who are strong, who are versatile, who can be moved around like chess pieces, and that's really how they deploy them. Those guys know their roles. They put them in certain positions and avoid putting them in other positions. Shanahan does a good job. Well, I mean, he's over the offense, but he does a good job overall making sure that whoever he has on defense is putting those guys in the best position.
Right.
That's why they just fired the other guy, right? That's the whole thing. They just fired their defensive coordinator because I guess to some extent maybe that was a problem. But anywho, I really think that you got a lot. I love that all these guys on the line, including Mike Morris, has a history of being moved all around. And I'm very curious about his role in particular because to go back to your point about Draymond Jones moving over to the edge, a lot of people have been really upset by this move or really confused or really bothered by the move. They feel like if you were going to have someone to be that power edge, so to speak, that Mike Morris would have been a better candidate. And while I understand that theory, I'm not sure that I agree. And obviously Mike Macdonald doesn't agree. I think we're learning two things about Mike Macdonald. One, he prefers NFL experience. And I think that it's smart to try to take Draymond Jones, who did some edge work last season, who did some edge work when he was with the Broncos. In fact, one of his better years when he played the majority of his snaps at the edge. And he was sort of moved around on that defensive line. Accordingly, he didn't exactly know where he was going to line up. That's when he got paid. I think it's best to take that guy and to see what he can do than to take a guy who already missed most of his rookie season, who's already sort of needing to play catch up, and then ask him to change his position again because they asked him specifically to change his body type and all of these things to become this interior defensive lineman. Then just to have him move him again, I think that would do a disservice, quite frankly, to Mike Morris. And I think I agree with the logic to choose to just ask Draymond Jones to do that instead.
Well, they're different body types, right? Like Morris isn't a play in space type of guy. But he's going to be, he's going to be steady. He's going to be smart. He's going to make the plays he's supposed to, but he's not very dynamic, right?
Right.
And really what you need, especially in this defense, what you need are dynamic edges. And so by putting Jones out there, he's a more dynamic athlete. His body type, I think, can more quickly become like an edge.
Right.
And, if you're looking to really, you're looking to create pass rush, right, with that edge position. And that's what Jones does best. And so if the other thing I'm thinking is they're trying to figure out how to get Jones, Murphy, and Leonard Williams on the field at the same time. Yes. You've got tons of resources locked up in these three players. These are three of your best defensive linemen. How do we get all three on the field? If we're not playing a 4-3, right? If we don't have a 3-tech sort of guy and we're playing this style defense, we need to figure out how. I like the idea of getting your best players on the field.
Yep.
And his defense is predicated on penetration into the backfield. That's why Draymond Jones was signed in the first place, right? So you have to get him on the field. And I think that, and I know there's a lot of people who think this too. I think Byron Murphy is a superstar, not just a star, but I think we're talking about a guy who changes the entire complexion of this defense. And so if that's the case, you have to get all three of those guys on the field at the same time. So, and again, Morris, to me, based on what I saw in the Michigan games, he's not a play in space edge. And if your edge is now predictable, if you see Morris on the field and he's not playing in coverage, then you become predictable as a defense as well. Not to say Draymond Jones can cover, but I'd rather have Jones, drop into a short zone than a Mike Morris drop into a short zone. Right. But this is probably the position group that I am most excited about on this entire team.
Yeah. I think those are all great points. And I think people are upset because you paid Draymond Jones to be this one thing and now you're changing him into something else. And I would argue
sunk costs
that you're paying him $17 million for edge play. I mean, if he can give you production as an edge player, that's super cheap. I mean, I think you actually get more value if the guy gives you more pressures, more sacks on the edge than vice versa. And I love it because this may transition us into talking about the defensive ends, but I'm not so high on the defensive ends. I'm high on the starters. And then I feel like there's a major drop off. I feel maybe not as strongly as I did about the offensive line depth, but maybe I feel pretty. I have a lot of questions when it comes to the edge depth beyond Nwosu, beyond Boye Mafe, who we do also need to take another step forward if we really want to talk about being the best team possible. We need him to take a small step forward as well, and that's not guaranteed. I think it's likely though, based on what we've seen so far. But then you talk about Derek Hall, then you talk about Daryl Taylor. You guys know if you listen to this podcast how I feel about Daryl Taylor.
Let me go. Let me go. So with Jones, we've already paid him. We already know what the contract status is. We've already paid him. So you get out of that whatever you can. You might go out and buy, this is going to be a bad analogy, but I like bad analogies, as you know. You might go and pay, $10 a pound for some oranges. And those oranges were beautiful when you got them and you forgot about them. And then you looked at them and they don't look that good anymore. And so I can either make orange juice out of them or I can throw them away, right? Because I'm not going to eat them anymore. So you're going to go make some good orange juice. And that's how I see with Jones. He may not be a dominant 5 tech that's getting 12 sacks a year, right? Which is what we wanted when we signed him. But you got to get something out of him, and he's going to be here this year. So you might as well figure out where he can fit and try to get some production from him. I just think the idea that, well, we didn't sign him for that doesn't make any sense. Who cares? We're now a year ahead, a year and a half ahead, and we need to figure out how to actually utilize the dude. Now, with the edges, I have the same thing in my notes. I asked, will Mafe make another jump, right? Because he was darn near dominant last season at times. We know Nwosu can be very, very solid, super important to this defense, very smart with assignments, dynamic player at times. Here's where I disagree. I think, and this is why I love Mike Macdonald taking over this defense, what they did in Baltimore at times, like with the edge that they picked out of Penn State in the first round that ran the sub 4.5, but didn't have any sacks at Penn State. He wants athletes on the edge. He wants guys that are fast. He wants like really dynamic, explosive athletes. And if nothing else, Derek Hall and Daryl Taylor are dynamic athletes. And as much as, Daryl Taylor at times can look out of place, make some really bonehead decisions, especially against the run, he still put up 21 and a half sacks in 3 years without any sort of polish, without any sort of smarts, right? And so if he can get coached up, which is, I assume is why Mike Macdonald wanted him to be signed to a 1-year contract. If he can get coached up, there's a lot of talent to be molded, right? And you don't just get 21 and a half sacks, in your sleep. You've got to have some talent there. And then with Derek Hall ran a 4.53, something like that at the combine, and is super athletic as well. If nothing else, your backups have athletic talent that you can try to make into something. Now, if they're trash this season, then you say, okay, we're going to cut bait on one or both of them because they're not really getting what we're trying to teach them. But again, when you look at what Baltimore tried to do on the edge and how they tried to generate pass rush, I think that a player like Taylor or Hall is exactly what Mike Macdonald wants. So to me, this position, just like the 5 tech position, the DN position, this is a huge strength for this team. But if Mafe can take a step, and if Taylor or Hall can be better than they have been, specifically assignment, what I call assignment true, or doing the right thing, I think this edge group can be a top 5 edge group in the NFL. I think they're that talented and that deep.
I'm not going to say deep, but I do think they're talented. I
agree
with you that they're athletes.
21 and a half sacks in 3 years.
Yeah.
That's a lot of sacks.
He gets them in bunches, man. He gets them against weak offensive linemen, and he gets them in like 3 in a game. And then
that's like when a team goes 13 and 13 and 4, and we say, well, they had an easy schedule, so whatever doesn't count. It still counts. Just because
I didn't say it didn't count. I said it comes with an asterisk.
Yeah,
it still counts. I mean, obviously, you can't take away someone's counting statistics, but I think you can evaluate the player and say those are cupcake sacks.
Okay, but that's a lot of them. That's still 21 and a half cupcakes.
He can get them because it's athletic. I mean, I completely agree with you. I think
Mhm.
he gets off on athletic profile more than technique or really anything else
But
for
if
that.
he's,
I think that he can just dominate some matchups physically, and then he's able to do that.
I think he's a passing down pass rush specialist as an edge who can get you a ton of sacks. And the reality is, I wouldn't say he's a better pass rusher than Mafe necessarily because I think Mafe has speed and power. But if you're going to line him up on third down and it's third and long, I think Gerald Taylor has a better chance of getting to the quarterback than Nwosu does. And that's no knock on Nwosu. I think Nwosu is a good player, but his value comes in the balance and the IQ and the having speed and power. Whereas Taylor his job is to get to the quarterback. The one who disappoints me more is Hall because I expected to see more of him immediately. But no,
Yeah.
I think they're both poised to take a step, and I just want to see what they do with better coaching, what I consider to be better coaching.
Yeah, for sure. I think I'll say this. On Taylor, I agree he can get to the quarterback faster, but I'm not sure he'd take the quarterback down. I trust Nwosu to tackle all day long over Daryl Taylor, who has let plenty of opportunities slip by just because he'll get there and then not be able to finish the job, right? So
And
I'll
once
say
we got to
that
get there
Derek
first,
Hall, I actually have higher hopes for
mhm.
long term, even though I was disappointed in his first year. I did think we did just a little bit more. I mean, you don't expect him to have a Boye Mafe kind of rookie year because I think Boye Mafe had a particularly strong rookie year,
Right.
given especially where he was drafted. But I think he can do more long term because he's more balanced. Like you said, Taylor is his potential is in being a pass rush specialist,
Mhm.
but I just don't know that long term there's any room for that in a Mike Macdonald defense where everyone needs to be versatile and switchable and able to do multiple things and not have one glaring weakness that that offenses can take advantage of. I think long term, while he will do what he can with what he has right now,
Mhm.
I think ultimately he's not going to fit just because you want somebody who's better at that, who's just a little bit more balanced. And I think Derek Hall, like I said, he's the more balanced guy. His upside is not as high when it comes to pass rush,
Mhm.
granted, but because of the balance and the versatility, hopefully I would say that Mike Macdonald can do more with him. Because I really do think his thing was just technique. He really struggled with technique. He really struggled with um probably could use some strength training over the offseason. I think the offseason will do him very well. So I'm eager to see what he comes out looking like in year two. But I kind of want to just I want to go back to it because Draymond Jones has been a hot button topic amongst Seahawks Twitter. And I do want to address one thing when you were mentioning, you're talking about, I completely agree with your point that he's on the team, use him. And I also just want to defend Draymond Jones a little bit because I think he gets a little bit more discredited than
Mhm.
what he should be. People feel like he gave such underwhelming production for his pay. And I just want to remind people that I feel like the because the Seahawks don't often pay defensive linemen,
Mhm.
I think the standard for fans in terms of production to pay ratio is so much lower than the reality in the NFL. I
Yeah,
think I,
exactly.
I think it's taken for granted. I think we're so used to Al Woods coming
Mhm.
in for $4 million and just giving
Right.
you great, be well beyond and above expectations
Right.
because you find these diamonds in a rough, but you can't win playoff games that way. You
Right.
can you can win regular season games that way. But we're talking about a young defensive line. I think youth is really important with this because I mean, also you getting these guys on bargain deals, you were because they're old
Right.
and they haven't been used, in good situations. Sure, you can plug them into the Pete Carroll culture and watch them grow, but you always saw it fall apart in the end. And then we wonder why the defensive line doesn't work because we've band-aids package things together. If
Right.
you want quality defensive line play with upside, you must pay for it. And
Yep.
I don't think that Draymond Jones is getting so far and beyond the market. I want people to remember, I think everybody is still stuck in the 2019 cap hit space, really, when people were getting paid $25 million and that was considered great. Okay. The elites in the interior defensive line are now pushing 30 million, 34 million, 35 million per year. So yeah, you're paying Draymond Jones 17. But I think, of course, if you're looking at the scale of a Chris Jones, right, and his production and what he gives you at 33, 34, whatever he's at, $1 million per year, then yeah, I think what Draymond Jones gave you is, about half of that, a little less than half of that below. I think it fits accordingly, right? And I just think that Seahawks fans need to, all of us, and I include myself, need to readjust our expectations when it comes to productivity, to defense. Defensive line is a key position. It's a valued position. So you're going to pay more money just for them playing that position. It's just what we are. We are yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. When you look at like there is a big difference between a defensive lineman in a 3-4 versus a 4-3. There's a reason why there's different schemes. 3-4 defensive linemen historically have not put up numbers. A lot of your job is to create as a 5-tech. Often you're either asked to occupy the tackle and the guard, or you're asked to split the two and try to penetrate to cause havoc. It's one of those two things, right? And it's also predicated on having really great edge play. And so in my mind, I want to know more. Like, I don't study it enough to know, like, how much did he pressure the quarterback? How many plays did he disrupt? What percentage of plays did he disrupt? That's all stuff for the coaches to do and, PFF or whomever. But the job of a 3-4 defensive lineman is not to post a bunch of sack numbers. And not everyone's going to be Aaron Donald or Chris Jones. How many of those guys are there, right? If you're a defensive lineman getting double-digit sacks, most often it's a 4-3 edge, right, who's playing typically on the weak side and not having to face the tight end much. Right. That's where you get your sacks on the D-line. So this idea that Draymond Jones is measured by his 4.5 sacks and by the splash plays, I think is unfair. I haven't studied him well enough to say whether he was a value add or not. But I also think, money is money. It's the same, the same thing the way I see like the 4th and 5th and 6th round draft picks. Are they important? Sure. Is it important to save money with free agent signing? Sure. But I don't know. I don't know. I'm not down with the criticism.
Yeah, I defend the guy. Now, I don't think he did great in regards to, now his pressure numbers are better, but I don't think he did great in regards to just being, I don't think he had like a Clowney type of effect where he was just disrupting the play but not getting the credits. I wouldn't give him that. I think he struggled in this scheme a lot. And I also, to his credit, the guy put on a lot. I think people say that, hey, he did not do well when it came to him playing the edge last season. Well, he switched positions literally mid-year. They moved him after Nwosu got hurt. That's midway through the season, and then said, hey, can you permanently play edge in this scheme that was already flawed to begin with? And I think that's tough. I think it's tough to do, even if the scheme is perfect. It's especially tough to do when another guy goes down and then you have to really completely change your primary responsibilities. Now, yeah, they put him at edge from time to time, but that became a primary responsibility for him. And I think that's tough. So I think I'm happy that he's taking the offseason to get better at that, because even if the coaching staff didn't ask him, he's saying, this is something that I struggled with. I didn't do my best with last year. I was put on the spot. I tried to adjust midway. Let me go get the training so that I can be elite or be just as good at this next year. I would much prefer that than a guy not do any training and just, like not take it seriously. Yep. I think the people are upset with him being trained in this position. I think that's an encouraging sign to me that he wants to be great at whatever he's doing, whether it's interior defensive line or the edge. And to me, that's a win-win. Now I'll get off my soapbox, but I just want to come to the defense of the guy because
but you're right though, because there are plenty of players. We get upset when we say we want a player to do something different or try to get better or work in the off season, and they don't. And you say, well, how come they didn't work on this, or how come they're not trying to get better? and then a guy tries to go, do the right thing by the team
Right.
and earn his pay, people always say, how come he's not earning his money? This dude's trying to go earn his money, and people are critical because it's not in the way that they wanted to see, because
Exactly.
it didn't satisfy their initial expectation. No, I think that's a great point.
Yeah. So anyway, I think that I put when it came to the defensive edges, I didn't put that there was any change. But I didn't necessarily now Draymond. If I'm when I did my notes, I did not necessarily account for the Draymond
Right.
edge thing because
Right.
also I'm confused about if that's a permanent position or if like it's just gonna be he'll rotate in and out, be moved all over the defensive line type thing.
Right.
Seeing him now, I do lean more towards you. I've seen videos of him now, and he did lose quite a bit of weight. Now
Right.
I do lean he'll be more towards edge. So with that in mind, I would change it from no change to being better. Most certainly, I think that he makes that line better as
Right.
to your depth, as to your ceiling. Because as much as I love Boye Mafe, I do think that Draymond Jones is just a different type of athlete. And Boye is still young; he's still raw. Draymond's got more experience. I think he
Sure.
can take advantage of certain matchups depending on who you're playing better than maybe even a Boye Mafe could. Not that I'm not high on Boye because I am, but anywho,
I
yeah,
think you need three. The other thing is, I think you need at least three edges to continuously rotate, right? And so,
right.
even if say it's Taylor coming in on third downs, Hall sprinkled in when you need it, or replacing for injury, that's a luxury because those two were second round picks.
Right.
If Jones is a part of that rotation, now you've got three guys that you can rotate through that they can stay fresh. I think you need
Mhm.
minimum three that you trust,
Right.
which is why Jones, that's another reason why Jones might be moving is it might be out of necessity, right? Because with Taylor, if I'm the opposing coach and I see Daryl Taylor on the field every down, I'm running at him. We
Yeah.
know that
Yeah.
he's not good at setting the edge.
100%.
So if Jones is in there and he can set the edge, which he did really well, surprisingly well last season,
Yeah.
now you've got three guys you can rotate, all three of whom can set the edge and rush the passer. And really, that edge position is completely solidified with the luxury of bringing in a pretty dynamic pass rusher in Daryl Taylor on third down.
To your point about the rotation, they played Nwosu way too much. In fact, I would
Mhm.
say that was a contributing factor in him ultimately getting injured because he didn't come off the field. He couldn't because, like you said, they didn't have the depth to be able to really rotate guys in the way you need to. So
Yep.
I dare I say, you get a better Nwosu
Yep.
just because you're adding in another dynamic guy as well. So changes the ceiling of the team completely.
I agree.
Okay. All right.
I'll
I think
come back.
anything else on D line?
No, I'm just excited. Again, front seven. I guess front five, I'll put it, because all backers aren't quite where I want them to be. But that front five is dynamic, potentially special. You've got breakout candidates all over the place, right? Leonard Williams could be an all-pro next season because of the attention other players are getting. Byron Murphy could be a defensive player of the year candidate in a couple of years. And I don't think that's blasphemous to say. Boye Mafe can put up 15 sacks. I don't even think that's crazy to say because he's got that kind of, power, and he can convert,
Beat the power up.
speed to power, all those things. Like he's bad, man.
Yeah,
And
he is.
I really, really, really believe in this group. And as I said on the last 360, the idea of this like snarling, slobbering, crazy defense that's just ready to knock someone's head off is what gets me going, and it's what gets the crowd going. I don't know. This front five is going to be really dynamic.
Yeah.
Really, really, really dynamic.
Super excited about that. Absolutely. All right. So let's talk about the other two in the front seven. Talk about our linebacker group. Time to turn on the heat. I'll let you go first. I've led on the next couple. So I'll let you lead on. Let's talk about our interior.
So on my list, I have. So for one, I've got Tyrell Dodson, Jerome Baker, Travis Knight. That's it. I'm in my notes. I said it's rough. I said if Dodson and Baker, that they'll be pretty good if they're healthy. I think Baker especially has a resume of good play. Dodson was very good last season. The one thing I am excited about with them is I think they cover In pass coverage, they're going to be a lot better than what we've had over the past couple of years.
Yes.
I also think that the fact that Mike Macdonald's defense tries to protect the off-ball linebackers with the defensive line play, right? That's why Roquan Smith and Patrick Queen could run wild in that defense, and that's why I think Hankins plays more than we think, is because he's trying to occupy the defensive linemen and let the linebackers make those plays. Are Dotson and Baker the two greatest off-ball linebackers to do that? I don't know. I think it's a stopgap, to be honest with you. That's why they both signed one-year contracts. But if we're bringing in players who are signing one-year contracts, I don't think we could have done better than Dotson and Baker. I just think this is a weak spot with the team. And then to address Travis Knight, Tyrese Knight, excuse me. Travis Knight was an old UConn white dude center at UConn, I think in the Khalid El-Amin days, if I'm not mistaken. You can correct me on that, but I think that's where I got Travis Knight from. Tyrese Knight I know I've been saying this over and over again, and I saw the comment you had on on Twitter.
Yep. We'll get to that.
People attacked you, and I don't know. I don't agree with the people attacking. People can have their opinions, but I'm just going to trust him. I'm going to trust him. I understand that this is kind of like McDonald's, I think, like almost like pet project, is to develop him into a starting off-ball linebacker. And they'll probably wouldn't be surprised to see them re-sign to a longer contract the off-ball linebacker that they can both afford and they think is better between Dotson and Baker to pair with Knight next season. That would be my expectation. But as it stands right now, if Dotson and Baker are healthy and Knight doesn't have to play often, I think that this is an average position group, league-wide, because there is talent, right? Tyrell Dotson and Jerome Baker graded out pretty well last season, and there is talent there. The depth is really bad. If you're expecting a fourth-round project from UTEP to step in and, cover Christian McCaffrey at times, which is what he would be expected to do, that's ugly. That's not a good position to be. Now, if they re-sign Jamal Adams, right, and Jamal Adams became a part of this position group, now we're talking. Now, Knight doesn't have to get on the field much, right, because you're going to play a lot of one off-ball linebacker formations as well. Mm-hmm. Now Knight's not on the field. Adams is set up in a position to succeed, and now you have even more dynamic players on the field. I would love to see that. I would absolutely love to see. I don't think it's going to happen, but to me, I would love to see them sign Adams or someone like him to be that third off-ball linebacker to not expose Tyrese Knight.
Yeah, I'll come back to the Adams thing in a minute. That's an interesting point that you bring up. I'll just flatly say that I definitively put that the position is in a worse position than it was, despite the fact that I do think that the pass coverage will be better. And that is a big deal, because that was my main concern with the group last year, was just that there was no balance in terms of everyone did the same things well. Wagner, Brooks. Now, Brooks did show some improvements in coverage. I do tend to think that had a lot to do with his contract year. I just don't find it coincidental that his best year in coverage was like the year he had a contract. So I'm not sure, so to speak, that he would be able to sustain that, or that he would be able to like take a step in the right direction. I've just seen 3 years of him being like one of the worst coverage linebackers in the league. So I trust that more so. And then you had Devin Bush. I think that group was both much more athletic. I think it was much more dynamic. I think, of course, given Wagner, you had much more leadership in terms of who's going to be orchestrating and getting people arranged in the right spaces. Yes, people kill Bobby for sticking in coverage. He did, but I think we always knew he would. In fact, I would love to have him back, because I just think that any other coach knows not to put him in those situations. I don't know why we have Bobby Wagner playing 100% of snaps at this age.
I so agree. I think like 80% of Bobby Wagner's deficiency in coverage is the responsibility of the coaching staff and not Bobby Wagner.
Correct.
The other thing is, when you pair Wagner with Jamal Adams, right? That's the other thing, is those two together on a defense is death, because neither of them can cover very well. Correct. And so now you have to cover for, or try to, just not expose two guys, players in your back seven that just can't do the job. It's not fair. It wasn't fair to either. Yeah,
Yeah.
it wasn't fair to either of them to me.
Mm-mm.
And then also to pair Wagner with Brooks. I know Brooks was a little better last season,
Right.
but they're still very similar skill sets, right? They're
Mhm.
still shorter, bigger, fast, really run stoppers at heart, with
Correct.
some ability to rush the passer and less ability to cover. It's just not fair.
Mm-mm.
It wasn't well thought out. I don't I wonder what John Schneider would say if you asked him honestly to talk about why they did it that way. My guess is that was a Pete Carroll thing in a lot of ways, because the minute Pete Carroll's gone, now you got two more sleek, right, more linebackers that have the ability to cover. I just think it was very much the fault of the front office and the coaching staff that Wagner was as exposed as he was. A disservice to Bobby Wagner, in my opinion.
Yep, 100%. And I think that you'll see Wagner exceed all expectations with the Commanders. I think he'll do great, just like he did when he played for the Rams, because, like I said, every other coach in the NFL is going to put him in a better position than what Pete Carroll did. Again, I'll get off that soapbox, but back to the point about to your point about them choosing John Snyder choosing to move on completely when Brooks was extremely cheap. He went for way less than people thought. It was 8 million, I think, is if I'm not mistaken, is what he ended up going for. I mean, they pretty much played that. They ultimately did pay two guys, but I mean, I think there's obviously not a big price difference. There was a choice. They made a choice to
We're
move on
just done.
from
Mhm.
Brooks because he did not have the versatility, and so they opted for guys who did. I can't fault that, but I still would have loved to see this room still keep Brooks, because I do think there's a question about, can he be put in a better position with Mike McDonald, similar to Patrick Queen, and how well he did under Mike McDonald versus he was struggling before Mike McDonald came along. That's just the reality. He really
Right.
was struggling
Was.
all around.
I think that's too much to me. That's too much money wrapped up in your off ball linebacker position. If you had all three of them together,
That's
um,
fair.
and
That's,
I was that,
that's fair.
but I think you would have to choose. But you could make the case that Brooks plus Baker, Brooks plus Dotson
Right.
makes sense because Baker and Dotson can cover a little bit better, right?
Right.
I think that they were done with them, and
Yeah.
I think they were ready to. The other thing is, I don't think it's coincidence they both signed 1 year contracts. I think
Mhm.
they have a plan in place, a succession plan in place for this position that starts with Tyrese Knight, and that they want to do something. They obviously don't want to pay this position ultimately, and they're going to have to plan for that given the amount of money that's going to go to their starting corners and their defensive line. And so they have to be cheap there. So this year is an opportunity to spend a little bit and to be competitive. And then Knight plus maybe even another rookie eventually is going to become the future at that position. You re-sign one of those two, Knight becomes the starter. You draft another inside off ball linebacker pretty high, and then eventually Knight plus the younger guy are the ones who start, because Spoon's going to get a top. If Spoon continues the way he is, they're going to have to re-sign him in year 6 to the number one cornerback deal, essentially, which we have no idea how much that's going to cost. Reek is going to cost a ton if he starts to play up to his potential. If he starts to play up to what he did his rookie year, which I expect him to do. Plus you're going to have to pay Murphy eventually. So in my mind, when you start planning out that far, off-ball linebacker is going to be a place you have to be able to save. Safety is going to be the same way. And I expect to see them throw a ton of draft resources at these positions to be able to create affordability for that position.
Yeah, and I think that's the right thing to do. I think in terms of a roster building perspective, I completely agree with you there. But let's talk about Knight. We'll just jump right in here. If you follow the show at Ethos Seahawks, which hopefully you do. If you do not, please follow us. You saw that I tweeted out my comments. There was just a clip that Corbin Smith had posted, and I just sort of retweeted that because I've been doing some research on Tyrese Knight anyway, sort of been thinking about it. So anyway, it prompted me to think. I was not responding to the clip, by the way, which several people thought that
Right.
I was just
Right.
basing that little one clip of him doing like I don't know, some drill with a
Just a
dummy.
small
It
drill, right?
really had
Yeah.
nothing to do with the clip. I was just using that because there's not a lot of content on Tyrese Knight, right? So like seeing something about him, I just quote tweeted it. Perhaps that was a mistake, but nevertheless, in my opinion, was that he does not project out to be a meaningful contributor on this
Right.
team based upon what I've seen on tape. It's limited, but boy, it's rough. What you can find, there's not a lot out there because UTEP just doesn't have a lot out there. But I'll say this. I base a lot of my thought process, most of it is based around this. A linebacker who struggles with linebacker instincts is like a wide receiver who can't catch. I just don't know how much coaching you're going to be able to do to fix that because a lot of his plays were guesswork. When he made a play, he guessed right. When he did not make a play, it was a disaster. It was sort of either all in or not. He struggles. He gets easily moved by motion. He bites on things. He's so easy to manipulate. And knowing that you're in a division with the Rams and the 49ers and having a linebacker that is that easily deceived at that level, even, I mean, given the competition at that time, is concerning to me. And I believe strongly in Mike Macdonald as a coach, but I just think that here's my take, right? Everybody's saying that they're going to trust Mike Macdonald. I think it's fair to say that he could have missed on this, and I still would trust Mike Macdonald.
Sure.
Because I don't count this pick as a meaningful Mike Macdonald pick. Think about the whirlwind that this guy has really. I mean, if you look at it from a human perspective, this guy got hired. He's probably one of the last, I think he was the second to last coach to get hired. So he was super behind. They talked about that openly, how they were super behind. Mike Macdonald himself said he did not get much time to look at these classes. He did not get to go to the Senior Bowl. He just didn't have the access to really be able to fully evaluate the breadth of all of the information, especially in regards to this specific, I'm going to say it's this specific position, but any position for that matter. He was pretty laid back about most of the picks. He sort of let John Snyder do his thing. John gave him one pick. It seems like this is clearly his pick. He saw some traits he believed in, but even his takeaway that his comments when asked about Tyrese Knight was that he gets the ball before other guys. He's moving before other guys are moving.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I'm not sure that that's what I'm sure he means it in the highest regard, but I see that is somewhat also problematic. When that's probably the first thing that appears to him, because I mean in the NFL it just doesn't, that's not super transferable, I think. And I think the reason why he was moving before other people is, again, he's super aggressive, right? That's his style of play. Not necessarily, it's different with Devin Witherspoon. It's because he was reading things. He's really good at reading the plays, processing things in front of. So he was processing things at a faster rate than his other peers on the field. That's not the same thing with Tyrese Knight. And so because it's not the same thing, I think he didn't even get to do a full evaluation on him as a player. And it's hard to find diamonds in a rough, right? Like we're looking at 4th round talent, 5th round talent. It's hard at that point in the draft to say, to know what I would say bustable qualities or your red flag qualities or your yellow flag qualities. He's just starting, right? And he even in the best case scenario, he's not planning on getting super involved in the draft process, right? Like he still wants John Snyder to do his thing, right, even in the best case scenario. So I'll say all that to say this. I definitely stand by my opinion. I do not think that Knight is anywhere near starter level. I think that you're right. They want him to be. I think it's going to show itself that he's just not ready. He's too raw. I don't see him in 1 year being able to fix. Again, it's not having the linebacker instincts that makes me cringe the most. Like you're a linebacker without instincts. I don't feel great about that, especially in this division. Right. Maybe there are other divisions that you can get away with it. Boy, will Kyle Shanahan take advantage of that. Boy, will Sean McVay take advantage of any weakness that they see in that regard. I think they're ultimately going to end up drafting probably 2 other dudes next season. And I think one of those guys will end up supplanting Knight still, and he'll still be a backup or what have you, but I just don't see him being the future that they really want him to be.
I haven't seen enough of him for me to be definitive one way or another. You know, I think we can read I can read a scouting report and it says one thing, especially about a more obscure player like Knight. I can read one scouting report that says one thing, another scouting report says another thing. I still go back to the fact it's a fourth round pick, and you can find good players in the fourth round, but you also see a ton of busts. And so let's say they've budgeted, to your point, like 3 picks total in 24 and in 25 at off-ball linebacker, and best case scenarios, they hit on 2. And now they've got their starters that are controllable for the next 4 years, because I don't expect to spend a first round pick on it and get a 5th year. I think that's great. Right. And the other thing that I heard about Knight that makes this pick more logical to me is he was one of their 30 visits, right? And if Mike Macdonald and John Schneider spent time with him, and they, we're human, and coaches can really fall for players where they love their attitude, or they love their intensity, or they love something about them that's not scoutable necessarily for us. And sometimes it's fool's gold. We know countless stories where that means nothing on the field. But we also know that there's stories on occasion where a player and a coach have such a great relationship, or the player is such a great leader, or whatever that might be, that their play is better than what was actually, what we thought we were going to get. And I think in this case, there had to have been some of that. They bring him in for a visit. Sure. They spend time with him. They can see him as the quarterback of the defense. He's got what they see as this moldable, athletic, frame. And they said, well, it's a 4th round pick. Let's go get him. So again, to me, as long as you're addressing the position in a cost-effective manner, right? Meaning you're spending draft choices and it's not a 1, and you're trying to supplement your young players with veterans like a Jamal Adams, like a Tyrel Dotson, like a Jerome Baker, even when these young players start, I'm good with that. I'm good with that, because your dynamic play is still coming from your D-line and coming from your corners. So what we need from these off-ball linebackers is to cover and to make the tackle when the opportunity is there. That's it. We don't need no 10 sack, inside linebacker or a guy that's going to have 200 tackles. That's not what they're going to do. We just need them to play assignment football.
And I guess this will be my last point about Knight, and this is why even the best case scenario, I'm not super high. Even if I'm wrong, I'm still not super high on. I don't think there's anything that can make me super high on the pick unless he turns out to be good in coverage. Because I would say that I was a little surprised that this is Mike Macdonald pick, because he is at his best a line of scrimmage like linebacker. Like, he struggles in coverage. I think that'll be one of his biggest areas of growth for sure. That and the instincts will be 1 and 2 with his thing. So in an age where everything we're looking to be more versatile, everything we're looking to be more balanced, I just don't see how he fits in long term, just because his upside, even if he meets everything that you think he is, he's a guy who can get you sacks because that's what he did. He's a guy who can tackle well because that's what he did in college. And he turns out to be able to transfer that and fix the instincts and awareness. And he's able to do that well. Mm-hmm. I still think he's at best, without the athletic profile, Jordan Brooks.
Jordan Brooks was the 1st round pick who was expecting to get paid. Tyrese Knight is a 4th round pick who, if he is Jordan Brooks, the Seahawks did a good job.
Well, not if he didn't. You got rid of a guy who you didn't feel like fit your defense to draft a guy who still does the same things that doesn't fit your defense any better. It's really the player. I'm not talking about the resources. I understand that the expectation was very different between the 2 players. Obviously, I'm saying in terms of you drafted the guy you just got rid of because he's not versatile enough for a guy who's a rawer version of.
I think he's going to be able to cover.
The ceiling is still Jordan Brooks.
I think he might be able to cover. If nothing else, I think they feel like they can teach him to cover adequately. They have to. There's no reason for them to draft him. The Seahawks will not have any more run stopping off-ball linebackers until Mike Macdonald's not there anymore, right? That's not what he believes in. So he has to believe that Knight can cover. He has to. That there are skills, athletic skills there that he can mold into a linebacker that's good in coverage. He has to
He's
think that.
slower. He's not.
Well,
He got a lot of
up
speed on
6.
him and awareness in it and instinct in it.
What did he run? Not that 40 means everything, but what did he run?
4.5.
I'll
I mean,
pull
it
it
was
up.
average. I mean, it wasn't
Pull
bad,
it
but
up.
it also
I'll
wasn't
pull it up right
anything
here.
that it wasn't making you think
4.63.
anything
He
that.
ran 4.63.
Yeah, I mean,
6'1", 233, ran a 4.63, 9'11 broad, 34.5-inch vert. Like that's a fourth round linebacker, right?
I not necessarily. I mean, you got Tyreek Will in the fifth.
I
So.
think well, yeah,
And
but
then
that
you can
was
find better
but nobody
athletic
thought
profiles.
that was like getting the dude on Madden that has the 99 speed.
I know.
Like, who's nobody, but he's got the 99 speed. So you're like, come on, I'm gonna draft him at the end of the fantasy draft. That's what Woolen was, and they
That's
hit
true.
him.
But most people did think that Tyrese was a reach at that. I think he was
Yes,
to a fifth, sixth round pick value, and I
sure.
think he was reach a little high. So that's sort of where I think there was a couple other linebackers on the board that I think would probably profile better.
Mhm.
Um, because at this point, to go back to your point about the depth, they really are one injury away from this guy starting. Like it
That
doesn't
depth
matter.
is
Like
well. Let me see what's listed in our lads as the man. It's Drake Thomas,
yeah, John Radigan.
John Radigan, Patrick O'Connell, Easton Gibbs.
Yeah, they're injury away
We might as
from
well just start making dudes up.
and those guys are both injured. I
Yeah.
think both are one is present at OTAs and just is injured, and the other I think is not present also because he's so I mean
Imagine two
night starting right
two
now.
injuries. So if Dodson and Baker both got hurt, which is not out of the realm of possibilities, you're now
No, they're
starting
both hurt right
Tyrese
now.
Knight and John Radigan as your two off-ball linebackers.
Uh-huh.
They're gonna sign at least one guy. I promise
They
you.
better.
They can't go into it with this.
They better.
Even Radigan is like I know he's played okay and he's a special teams ace, but he's on the bubble too. If they do go out and sign somebody, man,
Yeah.
it's gonna be ugly.
Yeah, I think the preseason won't. But I think when come preseason, people are gonna not be so harsh on my take because he's not ready. I think he's a guy that doesn't need to touch the field this year. Like seriously, he does not need to touch the field this year.
Mhm.
Develop. He needs to get bigger. He needs to get stronger. He's undersized as it is. See if he can get better. He needs to watch a lot of film. He needs to watch.
Mhm.
And I think that's your best hope at
Yep.
getting anything out of this guy. You put him out there right now, or anywhere close to now, I think it sets you back, honestly. And they're looking at that right now because they're not even healthy at the position that they don't have any depth for.
I think you see them go play a ton of nickel with one off-ball linebacker. In general, I think they'll play a lot of that. But I think if there was an injury, you're going to see that's all you're going to see, right? Or you're going to see, big nickel type stuff with more safeties on the field, which is not a great position for them, but they're going to protect Knight. I think you're right. You're not going to see, unless he plays a ton of special teams, you're not going to see him on the field much. Definitely not on regular defensive downs.
Yeah. Okay. All right, I have hammered my point home. We'll ultimately see. And to clarify, if Knight works out, I'm happy to eat crow. I really am. Like not rooting for the guy's downfall, but I am able to just based on what I've seen, and I will admit it's limited, but like I said, there's some core red flags for me that I feel pretty strongly about. But let's move on to the cornerback position, which is, I mean, we talked about how deep the defensive line is. Cornerback is even deeper. I think that's the deepest position on the defense, which says a lot considering how well I feel or how good I feel about the defensive line depth.
Mm-hmm.
I'll let you take off with the corner. So I'll give a rundown of where we are right now. Right now, you're looking at Devin Witherspoon, Tariq Woolen, Mike Jackson still on the team, Trey Brown is still on the team, Artie Burns is still on the team. You've drafted Nathaniel Prickett. Hopefully I'm saying that correct. You've also drafted DJ James. Mm-hmm. And so that is a loaded room. And there's right now, it looks like they're playing Trey Brown on the outside. And it sounds like they're doing a lot more Devin Witherspoon at the nickel. And so hopefully the Seahawks fans are at like 12. Y'all good with him being at the nickel? I know that was a strong source of debate that you don't draft a guy that high that's going to be a nickel cornerback, but I think his impact there is going to be huge. I mean, so anyway, you're saying that sort of helps, I think, organize the depth for me a little bit if you're going to have him primarily at the nickel. In fact, a lot of people reported they didn't even really see him on the outside that much. And so based on that, what are your thoughts?
So to address the nickel spoon debate, for one, when it's two receivers, it's Reek and Spoon, right? It's not like he's exclusively going to only play in nickel. And I don't think anybody's saying that, but you still have two elite guys. But the big point, in my opinion, is, again, I don't care where these guys are playing. Same thing with Draymond Jones. Get your best players on the field and set them up to succeed. Yeah. Seahawks go to Detroit again this season. Where's Detroit's best offensive player, right? Who is it? Besides Penei Sewell, who is it? It's Amon-Ra St. Brown, okay? Amon-Ra St. Brown plays what position?
Slot.
Yeah. It's not – there are a ton of incredible slot receivers. The other thing is, if you have a slot receiver who can lock down, or a slot corner who can lock down that slot receiver, you have so many more options with your safeties, right? You can double elsewhere. You can do a lot. And the other thing that people aren't considering is Trey Brown, we talked about this, graded out incredibly highly on the outside. And so moving Spoon is not just Spoon being the slot guy, it's putting Trey Brown in a position to succeed as well. So now you may have another elite corner because you're putting him in the place where he plays best. It's about acquiring great players. It's not about where you're plugging that player in. I don't get that argument. Same thing with moving Jones to the edge. It's just, yes, you spent a number 5 on Spoon. Spoon's dynamic, whether he's outside or inside. And if he's outside and he's locking up, the X receiver, that's great. But if he's inside and he's got 6 sacks, right? And he's got another 2 interceptions because he's jumping on these flat routes and he's putting pressure on the quarterback, he's your queen of the defense. He's that chess piece that's a queen that you can move all over the place. And Mike Macdonald's going to have fun with that. Spoon is going to be his Kyle Hamilton, the safety that Baltimore drafted out of Notre Dame. He's going to be that player for him. And Hamilton was so good last year in that role. So that kind of to me, it's very narrow-minded to just say you draft outside corners high, you don't draft slot corners high. This guy needs to be here, this guy needs to be there. The dude is just a great football player. Get him on the field, let him run around, give him some. The other thing is he has a ton of freedom as a slot corner. You don't necessarily have that freedom on the outside. One more bad analogy, and I'll be done with them for today. But for anyone who watches soccer, Lionel Messi at his peak with Barca had free reign to basically go anywhere on the pitch, could do anything he wanted because he was so creative and so smart, and they didn't want to shackle him to any sort of narrow responsibility. They wanted him to be creative. And I think with Spoon, he's got such great instincts. It's not as if he's not going to have an assignment, but they want him in the middle of the action. They want him to be a part of every defensive play. If he's a lockdown corner on the outside, sure, that's incredibly valuable, but he's not taking part in the action anymore. So to have him in the middle of the defense, be able to react so quickly, right, to the ball, it's to me, that's brilliant. That's the smart place to put him if he's capable in today's football. Here's another one. Where do the Niners throw the ball? Are they a team that throws deep on the outside?
Right. Yeah. No,
they're not. Right. So if you're thinking, where do the Rams throw the ball? Are they a team that throws deep over the outside?
They can, but
it's Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp working over the middle, right? Primarily, that's what they do best. So why would you put Spoon outside if your two competitors are two teams that do that? The other thing is Rick Woolen is a great outside corner, right? He is that's what he does. He's big, he's fast, he's a pterodactyl out there. So the guy that you want to go cover Marvin Harrison on the outside, that's going to be Reek. That's not Spoon. So I don't know. I don't know that people, if we just get in this mindset of this pick has to be this.
Right.
It's get your best players on the field, let them roam, let them put them in position to succeed and let them go. So that's my Spoon rant. So I just covered one player. Sorry about that. But I think Spoon, Reek, Trey Brown, those are your three. Trey Brown plays outside in the nickel. Spoon plays on the inside. I think you see Reek take. I don't know whether Mike Macdonald's defense is whether the corner follows the best receiver, but
I was wondering that too. I was wondering whether I know typically it's not a staple of the defense, but I wonder if there have been certain matchups where they're
going to do that. I think the size difference between Reek and Trey Brown, I think we might see Reek follow the bigger receiver at times. But the big thing for me, the question is not those three. I think those three are going to be very, very good, if not elite. It's who of the five afterwards are going to make this team. I think we see Pritchett and James make the team for a lot of different reasons, right?
Well, they've got him slotted as a backup slot guy, which only goes to further emphasize your point that the slot cornerback is going to be a key chess piece for Mike Macdonald. If he's got a backup for that position, he's serious about it.
And he has a backup at that position that was, as I said before, was a very highly regarded SEC corner, right? And Pritchett has such incredible athleticism. He doesn't mirror Woolen, but there's some similarities in terms of, length and speed. Now, he's not quite as fast or as long as Woolen is, but he has that he can do some of those things. I think I think Jackson makes the team, and then Burns and
it's just Burns.
I think Burns is the one who's out because Jackson has proven that he can make some very, very nice plays at times. I think he's a good player to have as that veteran, that kind of final veteran corner. But this room is just nasty. This room, and again, I think the big question mark is actually Reek Woolen. Is Reek Woolen the player from year one or from year two?
Yeah. And that's why they need the backups. I think that's why they've got the depth there, because there is a question about Woolen, and they also see those positions as very important. They've got Pritchett, they've got Mike Jackson, who they know is a solid guy to come in and fill in if Woolen, really he fails to improve.
I think Woolen's a Pro Bowler this year. I think he is. I think that he took for granted. One, I don't think he played as poorly as the people thought he did. Two, Mike Macdonald's not putting up with not tackling. Right? If he's not tackling, Mike Macdonald's going to bench him. And if he has any sort of pride, he's going to figure that out. But he's got such elite athleticism that all he needs to do is lock in mentally a little bit. And you're talking about a top 10 corner in football, in my opinion. And so I expect him to do it. I think it was a wake-up call for him last year to get the criticism that he did. I think it took him off guard a little bit, because he had such a great year, his rookie year. But you pair him, and if you get even the same play from Spoon as you got as a rookie, they're lights out. That corner room is lights out. I love it.
Completely agree.
Completely
agree. Yep, I do too. I think it's very strong. It's a really high ceiling. It's like I feel great about the defensive line. Really high ceiling for them as well. And I think really, I think you'll see guys be put in better positions. We'll use our man corners and man. And I know that Mike Macdonald does do more zone, but also underrated aspect that I like that nobody's really talking about is keeping Carl Scott. I think he's got a ton of upside as a coach. He's the guy. He originally worked with Rick Woolen his rookie year, because last year was his second year. So he came in with Rick Woolen, and hopefully he can bring out the best in him. I think having some continuity for that cornerback room is really important. A lot of things will change. A lot of techniques will change. I'm sure they'll work on tackling. Everybody except for Witherspoon needs to be on every tackling drill, and that includes Mike Jackson, because he struggled with that as well at times. And so because of that, I think hopefully that'll be one of the, kind of competitive edges in terms of who's getting reps. How are you tackling? Letting that be the barometer is something you could easily do with this room. But anyway, I think having the newness of foundation and fundamentals with the continuity of what Carl Scott brought to the table And people really speak highly of him. And I think that
Mhm.
all around the Seahawks room, and he was wanted. I think people assumed he would go on over to the Eagles,
Mhm.
but he did. They were able to acquire him to stay, which I also think speaks to his talent as a coach. So I'm excited about that as well. Okay, so we've been going over for an hour. Let's sort of wrap this down. Final room,
Mhm.
safety room. I'm gonna change my take. I've been super worried about the safeties. I went back and did a little bit more research.
Mhm.
Compare it to last year. I'm going to say the room is better. That's hard for me to do. I can only say it. I can't say it with 10 toes down. I got like 3 toes down.
Right.
But I'm gonna go ahead and say that the team is better because having to reevaluate myself, I've mentioned how earlier I think Seahawks fans need to revamp their mind in terms of how the defensive line is like the resources are allocated.
Mhm.
I think I need to change my mind on having name brand safeties because I'm used to name brand safeties. And the one time we did not have name brand safeties, it wasn't pretty. We
Right.
had Tedrick Thompson, and it
Whew.
was
Terry
it
Thompson was
was
the
a rough
worst.
time.
Yes.
It was a rough time. And so that scares me, but I don't think that these guys are Tedrick Thompson. And I think my instinct was we don't have name brand safeties. It's going to look like it did when we had Tedrick Thompson. I don't think that they're the same. And I'm higher on what Quandre did. I'm higher on even what Jamal Adams did than most people.
Mhm.
Most people are really frustrated with those players, really wanted them out, felt like it was best for the team. I understand that. I felt like Quandre was put in poor positions because everybody else was poor tacklers, and he's never been a great tackler. He's a small guy. He came into this. People don't really realize he had missed tackle numbers that were relatively high when he was
Mhm.
making Pro Bowls.
Mhm.
He was just getting interceptions, and so that was the difference, I think. Also, I think you had other tacklers on the team that were better, so he wasn't put as poor in as poor as of a position. I also think Jamal Adams started strong. I
Mhm.
really do. I think he started being not who he was, but he showed he can still be that player. And I think he just fell off a cliff, like physically. I just think everything that he was good at, including tackling, ended up falling out of the window. So it made him look terrible. Now, was that just because that injury that he suffered was can end careers. And so
Yeah.
is it possible for him to bounce back and just had a really rough first year back? Possible. But I also could see a world where that's just he's not able to sustain that over a season either. And I wouldn't surprise me. He was never able to sustain a season before
Right.
he had that major injury. So I mean, I'm not even sure his body was used to playing that much. I think that's part of it in terms of conditioning. I think conditioning sort of went out the window. But going back, looking at PFF, comparing how poorly Quandre Diggs was rated, how
Mhm.
poorly Jamal Adams was rated, particularly in areas of tackling. Quandre Diggs was rated like a 47, which is probably accurate. Jamal Adams was rated like a 29,
Yeah.
and that's rough. And so when you really compare their performances last year to what Rayshawn Jenkins did, and he's a really good tackler. He was rated 69.3 in tackling, which is and I think that's a big deal. I'm emphasizing tackling because they're the last line of defense. So
Mhm.
when your safeties can't tackle, it makes your defense that much more exposed. Um, Kayvon Wallace, I did not know was a great tackler, but he was a great tackler, especially his run with the Titans. I think he wasn't as strong when he was with Arizona, but he was elite when it came to that. Like I like to see that. That makes me feel better. And Julian Love did better than I gave him credit for. I remember him really struggling early, and that sticks out of my mind more. But he didn't struggle that long. I think he really only struggled for the first few weeks, and then he really sort of started to come on. And he obviously ended on a very high note. I did not know if that was sustainable or not, but going back and looking at it, I think it just took some time to get his his footing in this new scheme and the new defense. And I think I didn't cut him enough slack for that. So I think he's capable of being. I think clearly he's probably the best safety in the group now. Love, Jenkins, Wallace, yeah, Kobe Bryant if you're counting him, and Jarek Reed, who I'm high on Jarek Reed and his upside, but anyway, we'll come back to that. I think Love is still the best talent wise, and I think he can play the role. I question he was the third best guy last year on paper. I question could he be the first or the best? Could he really take that leap? And I think he can. He's faster than I think people realize. If you, I realized, and I went back and looked at some tape. He's rangy. He seems to have really good awareness and really good instincts, I think, which just showed, he got those interceptions. And so I do think he has more upside than I originally, like I said, thought. I think on paper, you could say the team is worse. But if you're really looking at the product that you got last year, it's an improvement. So switch up for me.
So the safety room, the way I label it is just do your job, because they're not, when you have that much money wrapped up in Diggs and Adams, you're expecting interceptions from Diggs, right? You're expecting to be able to play single high safety a lot. Right. That's why you paid him what you did. You didn't pay him what you did for any other reason other than to free up other players by playing single high and not giving up a big play. With Adams, you paid him to make dynamic plays, to sack the quarterback, to get, tackles for loss, big hits, that sort of thing, to set the tone with the defense. That's not what they've done with it. That's not what they've done with the construction of this defense. It's completely different now. It's many, many fewer resources. And as I said, your chess pieces are going to be Witherspoon. It's going to be Mafe, right? It's going to be Murphy. It's going to be Leonard Williams. And so the movable chess pieces are in different places, meaning the other players have to be in support roles and they must do their job. Your nose tackle must take up to 2 linemen. Your off-ball linebackers must tackle well in the running game and cover backs out of the backfield and some tight ends, right? Your safeties must not give up a big play, and they must tackle well when the running backs get to the second and third levels. So, but I'm not expecting anything dynamic from Jenkins, Wallace, or Love. Love might get a couple of picks because he is rangy and because he is going to be playing some center field. But if we just don't see a bunch of big plays, they've completely done their job. If we don't see the Seahawks get gashed, in running plays, and we don't see them give up, 15 receptions for 150 yards to Christian McCaffrey, the off-ball linebackers have done their job. So it's a do-your-job position. We're not allocating a ton of resources. We're not expecting big things from them. That's not where the dynamic plays are coming from. They may, but just do your job and we're going to be okay. That's why I'm scared of Kobe Bryant coming in the game playing safety, because 100%. He scares me. It's not that the fourth safety is a big deal, but Kayvon Wallace is a veteran. Rayshawn Jenkins is a veteran. Julian Love is a veteran. I like having veteran players needing to be assignment true, but not having huge expectations. So to me, this is a much less talented room than it was coming into last season, obviously, right? We know that. But the amount of money you're putting towards it and the expectations that you have of it, I think this is a much, much improved safety room over last year, because we know that they can do what they're being asked to do. We didn't know whether the question marks aren't there in the same way. As long as the scheme is good, the question marks aren't there. We went into last season saying, are we going to get the Jamal Adams from LSU days and the beginning of the Jets days, right? Is Quandre Diggs going to continue to be Superman playing center field? And we were hoping. I think coming into this year, we're not hoping. We're just saying, just go out and play some good football. Don't give up big plays. Make some big hits when you can. And Julian Love, if you can make a couple of picks, that'd be great. If we get that, I think we're getting very, very good safety play for what we expect.
The floor is higher but the ceiling is lower.
Yes,
And I think that's very
100%.
different than what I'm used to. I'm used to a high
100%.
ceiling, and honestly, I mean, we won't admit it, but lower floor
Right, right.
than what we were. And so
But
I think the balance
when's
makes
the
it
last
better.
time we've had edges like we do? When's the last time we've had a Byron Murphy where we're like, we've got a rookie D tackle or a rookie, I guess, whatever you want to call him, five tech,
Right.
who is might make the Pro Bowl. We wouldn't be surprised, right? Who could have 8 to 12 sacks and we wouldn't be surprised on his own because he's that talented. I agree. Like, I love great safety play, but that's not where the NFL is right now. And
Yeah.
I'm really glad that. So, overarching, if we're going to wrap it up, last year when we first started doing this together, I kept saying, I don't know the identity of this team. I don't know if they're going to chuck the ball to DK or if they're going to run the ball all the time. I don't know what this defense is known for. I know that they've got some big names, but I don't know what they're trying to truly accomplish. Now, it is so defined on both sides of the ball, right? And I joke about the running game. They're going to play with balance. They're going to play with balance. They're going to try to establish a run, but they're going to play with balance. They're going to try to utilize the talent they have on offense. And the offensive line is a priority. On defense, we know his scheme. We know what they're going to try to do. And we know that ultimately Byron Murphy and Javon Witherspoon are the centerpieces of this defense. And the scheme is going to be built around them, right? We know that going into the season. To me, that makes us so much better by itself because we are a very well-defined team. Will we be great in the first year? No, definition doesn't make you great. But as we acquire more talent, now we've got a very cohesive idea of where we're headed, right? Everyone is in lockstep. So that's what excites me about this team is the identity is very, very clear. Very
And
clear.
I think there is some upside with Jenkins. I went back and I looked at his how he did when he was with the Chargers, and he was better. I mean, he was better than he was in Jacksonville. And I'm not gonna befuddle anyone. I know they're doing better, but like Jacksonville is still
Trash.
Jacksonville, right?
Trash.
They're still the Jaguars.
Right.
And so him having a average at best year with them when he had better years with the Chargers, who used to have a really great defense.
Right.
I think that gives him more upside. I think it's possible that he outplays his contract. And so that aspect is exciting to me too. And I didn't realize, I hadn't really looked into him before. I didn't realize that he's shown better play. And so I'm excited, man, for this team altogether. I think overall, I would say that this team is better. I think you're right in the sense that it's less big names. I think people would say they have more question marks. I would say it has so much height. The whole team, like I just said it about the safety room, the whole team has a higher floor roster construction wise. I think, in my opinion, there are less holes with the exception of the interior. The off-ball linebacker thing is really scary. But other than that, I think that they really have set themselves a standard. Now, obviously, the coaching is a question mark. You know, will the coaching fail them? Maybe, but I really am a believer in Mike Macdonald. And so I feel really good about where they are. I feel good about the fact that they're going to be, if nothing else, good with fundamentals. And I think with the talent that the team has and the upside that a lot of these players are on the younger side, I think that's enough to be able to make a true run, to make a Packers-like run. I would hope. I mean, obviously the Packers did a lot. They like won playoff games and stuff, but I think it's possible for the Seahawks to be last year's Green Bay Packers, a team that nobody really thinks much of. I see a lot of projections for people having the Seahawks as the last team in the division. And on paper, when I look at it, it's hard to just be incredulous about that, right? I think I understand where they come from because they aren't guys. Bobby Wagner is gone. Quandre Diggs is gone. Jamal Adams, to most people's pleasure, is gone. And so the media looks at it and they go, well, I don't know these guys. But I think they'll get to know them really soon. There are so many solid, meaningful contributors who are just going to do their jobs, like a Leonard Williams, right? Like a guy that's not a big name, but does his job and he does it well and he does it consistently. And when you've got so many of that, I mean, that's how the 49ers guys got fame. I mean, these guys weren't, other than Nick Bosa, they didn't have a bunch of name brand guys. They had
Right.
a bunch of guys who came in and consistently did their job. And with that came team chemistry. They grew together and they became an elite team based on based on that.
Right.
And of course, coaching.
Right. And you have to hit, maybe Tyrese Knight is our Fred Warner. I'm joking. I wish we had video. I wish we had video for this one so y'all could see his reaction to my comment. I was just thinking how Warner wasn't a first round pick, and then it came to me. Sorry.
Man. Yeah.
No, but you're right though. You're right though. These are names that are not tremendously well known nationally, right? Even though Spoon was a number 5 overall pick, it was a pick people kind of ask questions about. They don't know who Boye Mafe is. Boye Mafe is an elite edge against the run and the pass. They don't know who he is. Jaron Reed is a no name to people, right? Mm-hmm. So, and Byron Murphy was a player everybody knew from the draft, but they don't necessarily know what the UT Austin people know. They don't know what Mike Macdonald is capable of with that type of defensive tackle. So I think your point is well taken. This is a team that they need to create cohesion. Mm-hmm. We are counting on them having a great coaching staff, which we don't know that that's the case yet. We think it is, but we don't know for sure.
Right.
But just imagine though, imagine in come playoff time, we've got this team with the top 5 defense that is just you have more fun watching the defense than you do the offense almost. And a balanced offense that maybe doesn't score a ton of points, but is playing really well. And a young team that's enthusiastic and fun and really Witherspoon becomes the leader of this entire team in many ways. That would be so fun to see them go into the playoffs and knock off a higher seed and be the upstart, young team going into 25. Everyone is saying, predicting them to be great because they've got a year under their belt. We know what Mike Macdonald stands for. That's what I expect. That's what I'm excited for. I can totally see that happening.
Yep. And I will say this. If they get that offensive line right, and there's a question, but if they get that offensive line right, health matters. But I think they can put up some points. Geno can throw the ball. He really can. I think people forget that when you actually give the guy adequate protection, that he can actually do something. And I think people just think he had a down year because he had a down year without looking at how bad that offensive line really was. It's barely functional. Anywho, man, I think we said it all. I think this is a great place for the team to be. I like being the underdog. I like being overlooked. And it's so funny to me because people say all the time that there's no, you guys don't have a Justin Madubuike over there, or you guys don't have a Kyle Hamilton over there. And I'm just like,
yeah, we do.
Well, not only that, but it's like those guys that didn't mean anything 2 years ago. You know what I mean? You didn't have Jadeveon. I mean, Jadeveon Clowney was a journeyman. I mean, Kyle Van Noy was you know what I'm saying? I think it's clear the impact that coaching had on that roster, and people. It's funny how people dismiss that the Seahawks roster isn't as good without really realizing that if you looked at that roster 2 years ago, you'd be like, what makes them special? I mean, they may be average, right?
You go player for player in pedigree wise. Madubuike, I think he went to A&M, but he was a good player, not a great player. And you're taking Byron Murphy with better pedigree, first round pick. Mm-hmm. Compare Hamilton to Witherspoon. Hamilton, there were some question marks about Hamilton. He was a great safety at Notre Dame, and in the beginning they thought maybe he's a top 10 pick, but there are questions as to whether he was going to be good and was he a tweener. Mike Macdonald found the perfect role for him, right?
Exactly.
Kyle Van Noy was he didn't know if he was a Patriot or a Dolphin or a Raven, right? He was kind of bouncing from each one of those teams for years.
Exactly.
Until he was utilized correctly in this scheme. So I think that's a great point. And it speaks to Mike Macdonald's ability to coach defense, that there are players who are either underperformed or didn't know they had the upside potential that they did until they played for him. It'll also be interesting to watch the Ravens defense this year to see if there's any fall off with him being gone.
Yeah.
To watch defensive football is, for me, I'm so excited. I am so excited for this season.
Absolutely. All right, Tino, tell the people where they can find you. We'll get us on up out of here.
Yes, so you can find me. My Twitter is Tino Jr. 20, TINOJR20. I host the Mariners Cast, which is a 3 times a week Seattle Mariners podcast. Lots of numbers, lots of fun. That's Ethos Mariners, ETHOSMARINERS. I also do a fantasy baseball podcast that you can find on Patreon. That is This Week in Fantasy Baseball, This Week, TWIF. I don't know. You all know the letters. I'm not awake yet. But that's a lot of fun. That's a new project with 2 buddies of mine. We basically just sit around and talk baseball from the previous week, more of a roundtable type, relaxed conversation, fireside chat. Those are 3 places you can find me. And behind this computer, talking with Candace, having a good time.
All right. Well, be sure to follow the show on Ethos Seahawks. And we'll be on the lookout for additional content as we go into more OTA content, more training camp content. We're definitely looking forward to that as the Seahawks gear up in that regard. But in the meantime, that's all the time we have for today. That's it. We're out. And as always,
go Hawks.